All right, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name's Amy Dessenberg-Wines, and I help manage the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. I'm also a member of Iowa's Employment First team. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to thank Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services and the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council for their continued support and investment in Iowa's Employment First community of practice. I'll be your host and moderator for today's webinar, which is the third part of our benefits planning series, and it's benefits and transition. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce and hand it over to Susie is this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment's YouTube channel, as well as to the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services Employment First page. That recording link will also be shared following the webinar, along with presentation materials to all of those of you who've registered. If you haven't already, please subscribe to ICE's YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available, and you can see the stream text link in the chat box to access closed captioning, so feel free to utilize that if you need it. Also, the presentation materials have been put in a Google Drive that you can access through a link that's been shared in the chat box. In order to just ensure that everyone can hear Susie today and hopefully avoid any technical difficulties, I'm going to mute everybody and disable cameras if they come on, just to make things a little bit easier. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chat, put those in the chat box. I think Susie will give some direction around how she wants to handle questions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'd like to welcome Susie Poulson, who is the Benefits Planning Program Manager for Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and just a wonderful, wonderful resource and support related to all things benefits planning. So thank you so much, Susie, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks to all of you for joining me today to talk about a very important time in the life of a student, which is their transition and going to work. So let me highlight a few reasons why it's important for our students to go to work prior to the age of 18. Working prior to the age of 18 creates an expectation of working. This is the age that students want to purchase clothes, cars, their own food. Working prior to the age of 18 also encourages independence for students, and it can also establish a network of potential employers for future jobs. You think about the jobs that you've gotten, was it because of someone you knew or someone who knew you? And I'll tell you a little story about my oldest son, who's going to be 40 this year, which I can't hardly believe, but he works for Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has paid for most of his bachelor's degree and his MBA. And the first interview that he had at Wells Fargo, the guy looked at him and said, "Tom Poulson, I'm going to hire Tom Poulson." It was a guy that we used to know, that we used to go to church with. So it's really all about, and I love to lord that over him, but it's really all about who we know oftentimes and the reputation that we have. So as we look at students, helping them get out there and let people know who they are is really going to be important. So Social Security defines disability for individuals who are under 18 by comparing their development with that of their peers. In other words, are they able to learn at the same level as their same age peers? Most students under age 18 will not qualify for SSI, for the SSI benefit, because the family, household, and resources is pretty high. So what this means is that a family has to have very low resources and income. Any income of the parents is going to be deemed to that child and reduce the child's benefit. Resource limits for those under 18 is going to be $2,000 for that eligible child, plus another $2,000 if it's a one-parent household, or $3,000 if there's two parents. So just an additional note on that, it's important to verify that this student under 18 is qualified for SSI based on their disability and not based on a parent's being disabled, deceased, or retired. So because this family is poor, they are relying on that student's SSI to pay for essentially what the family needs. They're not going to want to risk losing that student's SSI, so they will not want the student to work. But they don't have all the facts, and it's important for us to help them understand. Students under age 18 receiving an SSI benefit can take advantage of the student earned income exclusion as long as the program that they're involved with qualifies. So Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation staff need to, and the rest of you, need to explain to the family about the student earned income exclusion, which can make a big difference in the family being willing to allow their student under 18 to work. The student needs to be regularly attending school, which means that they're taking one or more courses of study and attending classes. If it's a training course, it has to be in preparation for a paying job and must be at least 15 hours per week if it involves shop practice, or 12 hours a week if not. Enrollment in Job Corps will qualify, as well as other government-supported courses. A program might also count if the hours are less because of something out of the student's control, such as illness or other circumstances that might justify the reduced credit load or attendance, like, for instance, COVID and being quarantined. If the training course is approved, then Social Security will exclude $1,930 a month up to a maximum amount of $7,770 annually, and that's for 2021. Those numbers should change probably around November. The development and approval of the qualifications for the student earned income exclusion lies with the local Social Security office. If you have a situation where a student is not qualifying and you believe they should be, encourage the student or guardian to appeal Social Security's decision by asking for a reconsideration. If that doesn't work, the student can appeal the decision to as high as the administrative law judge level if needed. The student earned income exclusion should continue throughout the summer if the student plans to continue school in the fall. Our staff can assist in this process by submitting the first pay statement to Social Security along with a copy of the student ID and the student's class schedule. Doing this seems to facilitate the application of the student earned income exclusion. What we've noticed is that when a student turns 18, Social Security assumes that they're no longer in school. And so we need to instruct families to make sure they contact Social Security to have that corrected. When I talked about our staff sending in the information, the pay statement, the copy of the student ID and their class schedule, Social Security now has what they call a work track system. So you can fax it to them. Any information that you have that you need to get to Social Security, that's probably the best way to do it right now. Mailing things doesn't really seem to work very well. They're very short-staffed. But if you fax it into their work track system, it doesn't actually print it out on a fax machine anymore. It actually gets scanned into their system. Their office manager then will review it and decide which workers should have the information, and they'll start to work on it. So it can never be lost. Like in the past, you mail something, they tell you they never got it. You don't know. It's possible they never got it. So, and if it gets faxed in, it's sitting on a fax machine, somebody else picks it up, maybe they don't know what it is and throw it away. You know, you hope that doesn't happen, but things like that do. So this is a much more secure way for us to communicate with Social Security. So I forgot to mention to you that throughout this presentation, I'm going to have a period of time where I stop talking and I just allow you to ask any questions you have based on what I talked about so far. So we're right there. Anybody have any questions? The fax numbers are going to be different in every office. The question in the chat is, what is the fax number you mentioned? It's going to be different in every office, like I said. And that's something I can also send out. I'll send it to Amy and she can send it out to everybody. But as far as I know, every one of the offices now has one of those work track fax numbers. So we'll get that to you. Any other questions?
Susie, I have a quick question. This is Amanda, by the way.
I recognize that voice.
Yeah, yeah. For students who are wanting to get the student earned income exclusion, is it kind of like the PASS plan where they have to fill out paperwork, or is it just simply sending Social Security your school schedule?
It actually is a provision that should be automatically applied to an individual who's under the age of 22 and it is regularly attending school. Now, like I said, at 18, they have a tendency to turn it off thinking that, oh, they're 18, they're out of high school. And that's not good, but that's why I recommend that first month with our staff, I just say that first month, we need to see a pay stub anyway for that first month. And so we might as well help out the families by going ahead and sending it in and explaining to them. Once we, start to talk about them becoming more self-sufficient, what we've done with some job candidates then, if they're able to do it themselves, is we will give them those numbers and you can set up a faxing system on your iPhone or I guess any kind of smartphone. And that makes it a little bit easier for people to be able to do that themselves.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, so let's talk about what happens at the age 18 redetermination. This is confusing. This occurs only for the students who are on SSI under the age of 18. Okay, kind of lock that in your brain right now. They have to be under the age of 18 on SSI. And remember what I told you is that these are families that are dependent on that $794 that's an SSI check. Okay. The other thing is we need to prepare parents for this age 18 redetermination that will occur sometime between the month that the student turns 18, but before their 19th birthday. The age 18 redetermination happens because Social Security's definition of disability changes when that student becomes an adult at the age of 18. Social Security will no longer be concerned with how that student learns in comparison to their peers. After age 18, Social Security wants to know if the student can work. So when parents are filling out the adult application for SSI or SSDI, it's important to focus on barriers to employment. We get asked that question all the time. They want to send in, 18 years of medical, and it isn't as necessary to go back more than a year or two. And it's really important to focus on barriers to employment. So the age 18 redetermination is considered to be an initial eligibility decision rather than a continuing disability review or CDR. This means that the burden of proof lies with the individual to establish that the adult disability criteria for benefits is met. Often parents will receive the paperwork from Social Security and just assume it's a mistake because their student's already on SSI. So they'll toss it in the garbage and later get a letter from Social Security saying that their student is no longer qualified as an adult. So why is it important to know which students on your caseload are turning 18? And that is why it's important to know which students on your caseload are turning 18 and include that in the transition conversation. So that's one of the things that we've been really trying to focus on with our staff, pulling that data and really looking at who do you have on your caseload is under 18 and on SSI, because that's going to come. So a few more items of interest. At the age 18 redetermination, if the student does not meet the adult criteria, Social Security does not go back to their 18th birthday, but considers the benefit to be ceased on the decision day. So that's kind of nice. In addition, the cash benefit will be paid for 2 months following that negative decision. So parents also need to be reminded that they are always allowed to appeal any decision, and they should focus on barriers to employment again when doing so. Parents need to pay attention to the timeline for how soon the appeal needs to be requested. So age 18 redetermination, Social Security will not look at substantial gainful activity, or SGA. In other words, students can be working during this determination and still be found eligible for SSI as an adult. This is very important to emphasize to students, teachers, and families. Eligibility for the Ticket to Work program does not occur until they've been found eligible for SSI as an adult. So typically you're not even going to pull a benefits query, otherwise known as a BPQI, for those students that are under age 18. Social Security will collect the forms that I've listed here, if they're appropriate, and will help in the determination. They will also collect names and addresses of medical sources for at least a year preceding that starting interview. Students will also be asked if they're receiving vocational rehabilitation services, employment services, training, or education, or any other support services like job coaching, customized discovery. Typically, Social Security will send those forms out for families to complete. The age 18 redetermination is automatic. If that student is on SSI prior to the age of 18, it's going to be automatic, unless the month prior to the age of 18, the student didn't receive the cash benefit. If that occurs, then the student needs to initiate an adult application. It's important to remember that since the student is 18 now, Social Security is going to want to take the application from them and not from the parents, unless they've received a decision from the Iowa courts and are now the student's guardian. The timing of the guardianship has been made simpler because now Iowa passed the new guardianship laws that became in effect in 2020, and the new law allows guardianship to be initiated 6 months prior to that student turning 18. It was a little bit more difficult prior to that. That was a really good change. It's important to note that parents are being encouraged by some attorneys in Iowa to do a power of attorney instead of a full or partial guardianship. The reasons behind this are that it's free and it seems easier to do, but there can be very serious consequences for our students. You also have to consider whether the student is able to fully understand a power of attorney and what it is that they're signing. So it's becoming a real issue, I think. Any questions? Okay, we'll go on to the next. So the age 18 redetermination is a critical time for parents and students. Every year in Iowa, we have about 600 students who will turn 18 that are receiving SSI, and 67% of those will lose entitlement. So what does that mean? Well, like I said before, it means that the definition of disability changes when the student turns 18, and we need to make sure that we prepare students and parents. We also need to make sure that the student has an employment plan in place. But why is that important? That's important because another provision from Social Security. It's called Section 301, and it guarantees continued payment under a VR or similar program. Informing parents that their student might not qualify under the adult definition of disability will increase the likelihood that they will be looking for that paperwork from Social Security, and they will fill it out in a timely manner. But many will still lose entitlement because Social Security doesn't see their disability as creating barriers to employment. our staff can help by making sure that the employment plan has been written prior to the age of 18, and it's because of Section 301. So we'll dig a little deeper into Section 301. So Section 301 provides the continued SSI or SSDI cash payment to individuals who have been determined by Social Security to be medically recovered, either through the age 18 redetermination or at a regular continuing disability review. I think medically recovered is difficult for people to understand because the disability didn't go away. But if you think about it in terms of the fact that Social Security is looking at, okay, well, can you work? I mean, the whole goal at Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation is, you know, community integrated employment. So we're all about employment. And if they're working with us, then they're indicating that they're moving towards independence from their benefits. It doesn't necessarily mean Social Security is going to come in and decide they're no longer medically disabled, but it is the step in the right direction. So for those who receive SSI under 18, this happens at the age 18 redetermination. So due to the fact that the definition changes and now includes the ability to work. So at the age 18 redetermination, Social Security does look at and render a medical decision. The other time that this occurs is when a job candidate is subject to a medical continuing disability review. Every job candidate is on a 3, 5, or 7-year medical review cycle. So to qualify for Section 301, that candidate has to already have an approved individual plan for employment, or whatever your agency calls that employment plan. Section 301 can apply to both SSI and SSDI, but those on SSI also need to meet the other criteria like low resources. I think a lot of individuals don't know that there are 2 different types of reviews that Social Security does. One of those is that medical continuing disability review. Like I said, it happens every 3, 5, or 7 years. If a person has a disability that tends to be cyclical, like MS, chronic mental illness, can't think of any more right now, then they're usually put on transplants. They're usually put on a 3-year medical review cycle. When someone's on a 3-year medical review cycle, Social Security is essentially saying that medical recovery is expected. Now, an individual on a 7-year medical review cycle, that essentially is saying medical recovery is not expected. So that would be someone like who maybe has Down syndrome, is nonverbal, spinal cord injuries, an individual that's blind, things like that. The other review that Social Security does has to do with work. It's a work activity review. And I do a micro training about that, about work reviews and how that plays out for people. But I'm not going to go into the details of that right now. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about students that you serve who don't qualify for SSI under the age of 18. This would be most of our students. So many students don't qualify under age 18 because of their parents' income or their resources. But at 18, they're an adult and they may apply under a household of 1. The student will need to provide documentation about how their disability creates barriers to employment. Unlike the age 18 redetermination, for a new SSI applicant, the student must be earning less than SGA or substantial gainful activity. That dollar amount this year is $1,310 in a month in gross earned wages. If the parent is planning to do guardianship, it really is simpler if they do that prior to applying for SSI. Social Security will need any medical records that validate the disability, as well as other information either from current employers from Voc Rehab staff or school staff that explains barriers to employment and support needs. Teachers, even outside of the special ed room, are teachers that you want to get evidence from them of how that individual's is, how they do work in the school, and provide that explains those barriers to employment. So parents always ask about the timing for when to apply for SSI. If you apply the month a student turned SSI, then Social Security is going to count all of the income and resources of the parents. So Social Security suggests that they wait until the month following the 18th birthday. At Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation, we currently offer a parent gathering. Excuse me. It's on the second Thursday of the month from 6 to 7 p.m. In the beginning of these groups, we started it during last May, I guess. We had big topics. You know, we'd have a topic where, you know, how do you apply for SSI? How do you get connected to Medicaid? How do you, what do you do about guardianship? After that, I realized we could just do all of them in one meeting because parents have questions when they have questions. And so we started out in the fall with a new format. And basically what we do is we have a poll up, and when they join that, it asks them what topics they have questions about, and that determines where we start. So whoever shows up is going to, their question is going to have priority. And I thought that it's really been working out well for parents because, you know, you never know when you're going to have a question about any of those topics. So this makes the most sense because every family is definitely in a different position with their student. The topics that we offer are applying for SSI, like I said before, and working with Voc Rehab or other provider agencies, anything to do with Medicaid and waivers, and then guardianship. We actually have a lawyer. Her name is Jennifer Donovan. She works for the Iowa Department on Aging, the Office of Guardianship and Substitute Decision Making. She loves the group so much. She tries to show up every single month, which is great. And she's a lawyer, so it's even doubly great because I'm not a lawyer and I don't like trying to answer those questions. In fact, I usually say, yeah, we'll have to get back to you. So this has been really nice that she's there and can answer those more detailed questions. So this last fall, or this coming up fall, we're going to resume our Young Iowa Entrepreneurs and Their Families gathering. And this group is going to meet on the third Thursday of the month. Between 6 and 7 also. And it's focusing on families that are interested in assisting their students start their own business. And we started it in January, but felt like we needed to take a break for the summer, or yeah, you know, people are busy in the summer, but we still are doing the parent gathering. So the Young Iowa Entrepreneurs will start up again in the fall. Okay, any questions? That's the end of my presentation. This is my contact information if you need to contact me. Okay. Amanda asked, to qualify for Section 301, does the JC need a specific employment goal? I did take that out of the presentation. She's asking about the employment goal because now we pretty consistently with students put in competitive integrated employment, or CIE. And I'm encouraging our staff to get in there a more specific, because if any of you have worked with a PASS plan is a plan to achieve self-support. Social Security wants that employment goal to be very specific. And so I feel like that's what they're going to want. Even though our our funder is Rehab Services Administration, RSA, and they do allow us to put that down as the employment goal. I really think that Social Security would want something more specific. So at least, like I said, as far as our staff, I'm encouraging them to, prior to that to them turning 18, make sure that you get an employment goal in there that's very specific. Any other questions? Yeah, you can just send me an email, and as far as the best way to refer a family to our parent meetings, shoot me an email with their email address and I'll add it to my list, and then they'll start getting those notifications. And I can send you the flyer too, because I did create a flyer. Other questions? So I can put my email in here. The slides are actually in the Google Drive. I think it was one of the first links that Amy put in here for all the materials.
I can put them back in, and we will actually send them out in a follow-up email to everyone as well.
Okay, great. Carla Mertens, hi, how are you? It's been a million years. I worked with her with a few people. So any other questions? Thanks, Amy. When I do this presentation for our staff, I started it a couple of years ago and I do it regularly. I actually do it in 3 segments. So they're called micro trainings. I'm big on micro trainings because I think we don't have time. None of us do. So it just helps to get that little bit of knowledge at a time. I have a regular rotation of benefits planning trainings that I do. If you're interested in that, just let me know. Also, just email me. Monthly, I do a Introduction to Benefits Counseling 101, and that one lasts about an hour and a half. So it really goes over the whole thing. And then quarterly, I do a PASS training. But then my micro trainings are pretty much every week. And I just invite everybody.
I put the evaluation link in the chat box, so if folks could please just take a minute to fill the evaluation out for today's session when our session is over, we'd greatly appreciate it. Does anybody have any additional questions for Susie? Susie, I want to thank you so much for your time and for taking what is an incredibly complex topic and making it much easier to understand. We just so appreciate everything you're doing to help people understand the opportunities and really help support Iowans with disabilities into moving into integrated competitive employment. Susie's a wonderful resource. I know she's willing to help anyone at any time navigate that difficult benefits network. And so I encourage you to reach out if you have questions. We'll stay on for a few more minutes in case additional questions come in. I also am putting in the chat box our last session on the benefits planning series is going to be August 17th, 1 to 2 p.m. Brian Dennis is going to be our presenter, and it is on subsidies and special conditions. So I've put in the chat box the short overview and the registration link. I encourage folks to sign up for that as well. So we'll just wait for a few more minutes and see if there's any additional questions that come in. And again, I want to thank you so much, Susie, for your time and willingness to share this great information with everyone. All right. Susie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully, we'll see you again on August 17th for the 4th in our benefits planning series. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.